Humans have been using ciphers at least as far back as 400 BC. The first known cipher, used by the ancient Greeks, was designed for secret military communications. This would remain a common reason for the use of coded messages over the next 2.5 millennia, though the reasons people encrypt text has become far more varied. People have encoded their writing to conceal trade secrets, avoid religious persecution for their pursuit in science, and sometimes even just for the hell of it. Many ciphers had no real reason to be encoded other than as a fun challenge or to prove that the writer was just a bit more of a big brain than everybody else. Thanks to computers, cryptography has advanced from simple ciphers, and it now utilizes complex maths, physics, computer science, and more. But even as the use of computers in cryptography becomes more advanced, both for encoding and decoding information, there remains numerous ciphers that thus far have just been impossible to solve. Kryptos. Kryptos is a sculpture that was installed on the grounds of the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia in November of 1990. It was created by American artist Jim Sanborn in collaboration with retiring CIA employee Ed Scheid. Ed was the chairman of the CIA Office of Communication, and he was the one who came up with the systems of encoding that would be used for the sculpture. The sculpture contains 4 different passages, each using a different method of encryption. Unlike most ciphers that are put into the world and left for people to solve on their own, Sanborn has actually been somewhat active in interacting with the solving community. In 1999, computer scientist Jim Gilligy became the first person to publicly state he had solved the first 3 passages with the aid of a computer. The first 2 passages used Vignere ciphers, a complex type of substitution cipher where each letter in the plaintext is replaced with a different letter. The third passage used a transposition cipher, essentially making it a gigantic anagram. After Gilligy's announcement, the CIA revealed that they had deciphered the first 3 passages in 1998, and the show-offs at the NSA stated that they'd done it back in 1992. However, Sanborn responded by saying that all of their solutions were wrong, not because they had solved it incorrectly, but because he screwed up and accidentally omitted a letter near the end of the second passage. He then put out the correct solution for the second passage. Despite extensive effort from both professionals and amateurs, and the first 3 passages being solved by multiple people working independently of one another, nobody's been able to solve the final passage. Sanborn has stated that the first 3 passages contain clues on how to solve the final one, and he has even given much more explicit hints. In 2010, Sanborn revealed that 6 letters in the final cipher become the word Berlin after decryption. 4 years later, he revealed that the next 5 letters would become the word clock, so he added that there were multiple interesting clocks in Berlin. The most recent clues came in 2020 when Sanborn stated that part of the ciphertext reads east-northeast. Even though it's now known what some of the plaintext is supposed to say, nobody seems to have gotten any closer to deciphering the entire 4th passage. Sanborn says that Kryptos is a riddle within a riddle and can only be solved after all 4 passages have been decoded. There's heavy speculation that either the final passage or the riddle within has something to do with the Enigma machine, but nobody has any idea how. Although Sanborn's now 77, he has made it clear that he will not let the solution die with him. In 2020, he announced that should he die before the final passage is deciphered, the solution to Kryptos will be put up for auction. Of course, whether the person who wins that auction will publish the solution or simply use it to confirm or deny whether others have successfully deciphered the message is anybody's guess. Zodiac Killer ciphers. The Zodiac Killer is one of the most famous unsolved cases in American history. Like many serial killers, Zodiac loved to taunt the police, and he used the press to release his letters. On 4 occasions, he sent letters to newspapers that included ciphers. Now, each cipher has been named Z, followed by the number of characters included in it. Z408 was the first cipher sent to papers in 1969, and it was split across 3 different newspapers. It was solved within a week by a husband and wife team who spent a total of 20 hours to find the solution. The couple were also amateurs and not professional code breakers. Later that same year, Zodiac would send the Z340 cipher to the San Francisco Chronicle. While deciphering the first message had seemed almost trivial, this one would take 51 years to finally crack. It was solved by a team of amateurs, but when they decoded the message, they immediately knew it was correct. The letter mentioned not being the man on TV, and that he wasn't afraid of the gas chamber. Just 2 weeks before the letter was received, a TV talk show host had received a call on air from someone that claimed to be the Zodiac Killer. The caller mentioned needing help and not wanting to go to the gas chamber, and the letter's refutation of that call left the team confident that they had cracked it. Their work would later be confirmed as accurate by the FBI, but this unfortunately did nothing to help identify who the killer was. The final two ciphers would come in 1970. They were extremely short, being labeled Z13 and Z32. The letter containing Z13 opens, "This is the Zodiac speaking. By the way, have you cracked the last cipher I sent you? My name is blank," and it's followed by the Z13 cipher. The Z32 cipher was received a few months later and claimed to be the location of a bomb that it had planted. Many people have claimed to have solved both Z13 and Z32, though nothing has been verified. Z13 would be of particular interest, as it allegedly includes the killer's name, but people have solved it in literally hundreds of different ways. Proposed solutions range from Lawrence K., the name of a known suspect in the case, to "I'll never tell." However, according to experts, the Zodiac's remaining ciphers aren't just undeciphered, they're undecipherable. Solving ciphers relies on finding patterns and letter combinations, and with so few characters, it's impossible to prove any sort of pattern existed, hence the hundreds of different names that have been proposed. It's also possible that the cipher was spelled wrong, as Zodiac's solved ciphers include numerous spelling errors. You may assume that somebody wouldn't spell their own name wrong, but encryption methods can be complicated and mistakes are easy to make. Sanborn had managed to omit an entire letter by mistake on Kryptos, a sculpture that cost $250,000 in 1988, so it's not hard to imagine that somebody handwriting a note could accidentally mess it up as well. Because the Z13 letter referenced the previous cipher, in 2021 a French engineer decided to try to decrypt it using the same key used in the Z340 cipher. He came up with Lawrence K., a misspelling of the alleged suspect. Though his announcement received some level of notoriety, experts don't agree with this work. K is also thought to be a very weak suspect. Unfortunately, because Zodiac's last two ciphers are so short, it's unlikely there will ever be an agreed-upon solution. The Dorabella Cipher. Before he was Sir Edward William Elgar, 1st Baronet, the famous English composer was simply Edward Elgar, humble music teacher. In 1886, at the age of 29, he began teaching Caroline Alice Roberts, a published author from a prominent family who was 37 at the time. The two fell in love, and 3 years later they got married, despite the outraged protestations from Alice's family over her decision to marry beneath her station. Alice would put much of her own career and ambition to the wayside to help further the career of Edward. It would take time to build his reputation, but he finally found major success in 1899 with his Enigma variations and later with his Pomp and Circumstance marches. But in addition to his orchestral compositions, he was also a big fan of ciphers. In 1895, Alice's friends married the widower Reverend Alfred Penny. A couple of years later, Edward and Alice were invited to spend time with the Pennys for a few days. It was there that the now 40-year-old Edward met Alfred's 23-year-old daughter from his first marriage, Dora. The two immediately hit it off and became lifelong friends. Edward would even name Variation 10 of the Enigma variations as Dorabella. All the variations were named after his friends and were written in the manner in which he felt they would have composed it. Following the Elgars' return home, Alice composed a thank you letter to her friends for their hospitality. Edward inserted a note into the envelope addressed to Miss Penny. The note contained 24 unique characters, which just looked like a bunch of curly squiggles. Penny filed the note away in a drawer where it would stay for the next 40 years. The existence of the cryptic letter only became known in 1937 when Dora published her memoir, Edward Elgar Memories of a Variation. She had the note reproduced in her work, and she stated that while she assumed it was a cipher, she'd never been able to read it. Since its initial publication, nobody has been able to definitively decode the 87-character message to Dora. There are a number of different proposed solutions to the cipher, most of which appear to be some sort of love letter from Edward to Dora. Because the 24 characters are squiggles of 3 different lengths pointed in 8 different directions, it has been proposed that the direction may correspond to the notes of a scale, and the length indicates whether the note is natural, flat, or sharp. That theory doesn't really work given the structure of a musical scale, but the 24 characters could correspond to 2 full octaves of notes. It could also be fewer notes, but of varying lengths. While the idea that it was a secret musical composition is interesting, the cipher is likely unrelated to his work as a composer. If Edward had a message that he had to conceal because it was meant only for Dora, it is far more likely that it would have been words. It's hard to say whether or not the Dorabella cipher will ever be solved. In 2007, the Elgar Society held a competition to decipher the letter in honor of Edward's 150th birthday. Though many entries were received, none were deemed to have been genuine solutions. The agapeyeff cipher. The agapeyeff cipher is not only one of the most famous unsolved ciphers in the world, it was created by the man who literally wrote the book on ciphers. In fact, that's where it first appeared. It's also the most embarrassing unsolved cipher for a reason that'll become clear very shortly. Codes and Ciphers was an elementary book on cryptography written and published by Alexander agapeyeff, an English cryptographer and cartographer who was born in Russia. The book contained instructions on how to solve a number of different types of ciphers, and it included multiple examples for the readers to attempt to decode themselves. In books like this, it was tradition to include a final puzzle for the readers. The book ends with the words, "Here is a cryptogram upon which the reader is invited to test his skill," followed by a long string of 5-digit numbers. It was the second of 2 final puzzles, but nobody was able to solve this one, not even the author. After being asked about the puzzle numerous times, agapeyeff eventually admitted that he had forgotten how he encrypted the final message. This was essentially an introductory book to cryptography, so the techniques used for the puzzle should not have been that complicated. And yet, over 70 years later, nobody's been able to find a solution. agapeyeff died in 1955, still unable to remember what his message was or how he had encrypted it. As unbelievable as that may sound, it's not the only time somebody forgot how to decrypt their own cipher. Bryant Patrick Regan was a former member of the US Air Force turned traitor. Regan had become saddled with debt and decided to steal top-secret government documents and sell them to America's enemies to fix his financial problems. And spoiler alert, that's a bad idea. He'd hidden boxes containing over 10,000 documents, as well as CD-ROMs full of government documents buried in various parks. Regan had written down their locations using a series of complex ciphers. Just in case, he had a backdoor key to the decryption within the codes themselves. In the event that he forgot how he had encrypted the data, all he had to do was remember a keyword, and he could use that to unlock the rest of the details about the encryption methods. After being arrested by the FBI when attempting to sell documents to the Libyans, Regan realized that it was in his best interests to cooperate with the authorities. However, he'd forgotten both the ciphers used and the keyword for one of his own encoded messages, though eventually the code was cracked anyway. But as unbelievable as it may seem, it is definitely possible for someone to forget how to decipher their own work even after a short period of time. But is that actually what happened with the agapeyeff's cipher? Some people aren't so sure. It's possible that rather than forgetting how he encrypted the message, agapeyeff made a mistake in his work, resulting in it being impossible to solve, and he was just too embarrassed to admit it. It certainly wouldn't tell the sales of an educational book if the author revealed that they couldn't even do the thing that they were trying to teach. Another possibility is that people have been trying to find a message in the wrong language. The first steps of decoding the message, taken by most people, result in a string of characters that contains a seemingly abnormal quantity of double and even triple of the same letter in a row. While this is unusual in English, it is much less so in Russian, which has led many people to believe that they wasted the last 70 years trying to find a solution in the wrong language. So, was the cipher created or printed incorrectly, making it unsolvable, or has it just proven too difficult for anyone to figure out? Well, we might never know the answer to that question. Despite being so famous, the agapeyeff cipher is rarely seen as being a high priority compared to other ciphers. It's not something tantalizing like a secret communique or a map to hidden treasure. It's simply a puzzle at the end of an instruction manual. It would certainly be nice to have the solution, but realistically the encoded message will probably be something like, make sure you drink your Ovaltine. The Voynich manuscript. The Voynich manuscript was published in 1912 by Wilfrid Voynich as part of an illicit sale of manuscripts from a Jesuit college. Though the book has been named after him, it's believed to date back over 600 years. The book is 200 pages long, and it's written in an entirely unknown language that has been named Voynichese. The manuscript is likely either a medicinal or alchemical text, but virtually none of the pages have been successfully decoded. Now, if you'd like to know more about this manuscript that has been dubbed the world's mysterious book and the incredible lengths to which people have gone to both confirm its authenticity and attempt to decrypt it, you can check out our full episode over on Decoding the Unknown. And as always, thanks for watching.